Over what is Jesus sovereign? That's what we're talking about today on Byte-Size Theology. Hello and welcome to Byte-Size Theology. My name is Philip Nelson. We are continuing in Mark for our summer reading challenge of 2022. Today I would like to share my reflections from Mark chapter 5, which surveys a scope of Jesus' surprising sovereignty. Mark chapter 5 has two primary parts. First, Jesus heals the Gerasene demoniac in chapter 5, verse 1 through 20. And second, Jesus heals a woman with a discharge of blood for 12 years and then raises the 12-year-old daughter of Jairus, chapter 5, verse 21 through 43. Today's reflection will actually borrow the final verses of Mark chapter 4 and survey the whole of Mark chapter 5. We'll move through 4 scenes. So let's jump in. Scene 1, sovereign over nature. Mark 4 ends with the account of Jesus calming a storm. These disciples, some of whom had spent their whole lives upon the lake, experience a horrendous storm. The storm was so bad that they thought they were going to die, and so they wake up Jesus and cry out, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Jesus wakes up and literally rebukes the wind. He speaks to the sea, "Peace, be still." And just like that, the wind ceased. I love the way that verse 39 ends. There was a great calm. Whereas there was a great windstorm, now there is a great calm. I cannot imagine what kind of thoughts and feelings would be going through my mind simply from the physical aspect of it. My body that was being thrashed about to and fro in the small boat, then all of a sudden a total calm. Now, one thing is clear. Verse 41 says that the disciples were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Where previously they had feared the inevitability of their death, now they are filled with a greater fear. Notice the repetition again of the word great. A great storm, a great calm, and now a great fear. In some ways, the sea is something that they had understood, and death was something that they had dealt with before. But this was something that they had never seen, nor could they really wrap their minds around it. Now, for more on this topic, I recommend reading the book The Holiness of God by R.C. Sproul, and specifically the chapter entitled The Trauma of Holiness, which walks through this very scene. You can see the link below in the description. Now, one thing is clear from this section. Jesus is sovereign over nature. Now, scene 2, sovereign over the powers of darkness. After experiencing the calming of the storm, the group arrives on the other side of the sea to be met by a man with an unclean spirit. He was so wild that he could not be bound with a chain. People had tried, but he had wrenched the chains apart. He broke the shackles into pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Upon his arrival, while Jesus was still far off, this man saw him, and he ran to him and fell down before Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." What a scene. Can you imagine as though you were one of the disciples? Here comes running towards us a man covered with cuts and unable to be subdued by anyone. He runs up to your master and falls at his feet. Jesus needed no brute strength. He required no chain. By his presence, he subdued the power of darkness that dwelt in that man. All he had to do was to speak, and at his command, they left him. And where once a great spiritual storm had consumed this man, there now is a great calm. The people of that city came to Jesus, and they saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. And once again, the response to this tremendous power was fear. Now, while we might have many questions about this passage, one thing is clear from this scene. Jesus is sovereign over the powers of darkness. Now, scene 3. He is sovereign over chronic ailments. Jesus left that area and crossed back to the other side of the sea, only to be met by another crowd. A father approached him with the urgent request to help his sick daughter. But on the way, he was interrupted by a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years. It's interesting to note that Mark writes in this way that she suffered much under many physicians and spent all that she had, and she only grew worse. This woman had tried everything. No money left in the account. No physician was able to help. No clear path forward. But she had heard about this person named Jesus, and she believed that if she could just touch Jesus' garment, that she could be healed. Now note, it was not that she made some kind of belief about some kind of magical clothes, but rather she believed in the power of Christ, the one who wore them, and that if she could reach his clothes, she could have something of his power to heal her. She pressed through the crowd, and she did touch his garments. And Jesus spoke to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Where every intervention that was available to this woman had failed, the power of Jesus succeeded. Once again, one thing is clear from this section: Jesus is sovereign over chronic ailments. Section 4, or scene 4, sovereign over death. The father who had approached Jesus, who was now delayed by this woman, received word that his daughter was dead. Jesus interjected, saying, "Do not fear, only believe." When they arrived at the man's house, the weeping and wailing had already started. You can only imagine the pit in the father's stomach as those who are at the daughter's bedside are now seen weeping. Jesus takes a small audience, the child's father, mother, Peter, James, and John, and they go to where the child was. He takes her by the hand and says to her, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And as Mark likes to say, immediately she got up. Where the disciples may have thought that Jesus' power to heal was limited to subjects that were still living, this blew that thought completely out of the water. Not only is Jesus sovereign over sickness, what's clear from this section, Jesus is sovereign over death. And that would be most clearly seen and declared in his own resurrection. So in each of these scenes, we see, in part, the breaking through of the kingdom of God into our sin-sick world. So what is your reaction to the display of the surprising sovereignty of Jesus? Do you, like the disciples and the healed woman, respond with a reverent fear? Do you, like the man previously possessed by Legion, long to be with Jesus? Are you like the parents who received their 12-year-old daughter back from the jaws of death, overcome with amazement? Have you encountered this sovereign Jesus? There is nothing outside the sphere of his sovereignty, and therefore there is no hurt beyond his healing. There is no challenge in your life stronger than him. There is no burden that you cannot bring to him. After going through this chapter, I took some time to worship the Lord through song in the song, "The Almighty Reigns," Psalm 93 by Sovereign Grace. I've added a link in the description. So, which part of Mark chapter 5 grabbed your heart? This week, how are you going to walk in faith in this awesome Christ? Do you have any thoughts about Mark chapter 5? As normal, let me know in the comments below. If you have not already, please join us in the Summer Reading Challenge. I've included the link to a PDF for the reading plan in the description below. As always, thank you so much for joining me today on Byte-Size Theology. And as usual, may our great and gracious God grant you focused, faithful, and fruitful time in his word. I'll see you over in the next episode.